why are we all walking into these things with no understanding of self, expecting the other person to know and wanting them to feel our wounds or heal our wounds? It's make me feel better. If you don't know how you feel and what you need because you're too scared to actually feel the full emotion to understand your own needs, how the is a man going to know what you need? It's that you don't have a rule book.
A lot of women don't know how to communicate with men so that it lands for them. So there's a lot of the similar kind of complaint of, I have to ask 10 times. He should just, have common sense, right?
Kind of selfish, kind of my needs to be filled. If this is not this, well, that's red flag. This whole red flag thing really pisses me off.
You're good at identifying red flags outside of yourself. Let's look at your own red flags. Yeah. What are your own red flags? And we should all have the ability to identify our own red flags.
Well, it's not until you're in a relationship that you go, oh, I'm not as healed as I thought I was.
So at some point, we have a choice. We can simply go, I'm so sick and tired of living these same problems and challenges and being in this reality.
What if we can just walk beside each other and hold that space for each other and we're not comparing or fighting or protecting, you know what I mean? That's such a different reality. So welcome to episode 3 of Spill the SpiritualiTEA. I'm very excited for this deep dive with this beautiful lady that I have with us today, Linda. And I will share a little bit about her expertise first, and then we'll dive into our juicy conversation. But Linda Luv Doktar is a highly skilled love and relationship coach who helps couples and singles heal their master the art of conscious and skillful relating. Her work assists men and women to understand each other and to work better together so that they thrive in communication, passion, and intimacy. Linda holds extensive knowledge in feminine and masculine dynamics. I'm very excited. Tantra, human behavior, and relationship repair. Her wisdom and thought-provoking teachings will take you on a journey into life-changing personal transformation and long-lasting relationship success, which I feel is going to be the most amazing conversation. And on a personal note, Linda and I have been like walking around each other's fields for a very long time in the yoga scene and just in general on the Gold Coast, because we've never connected. And it's only been recently that we've had these really random deep conversations on Instagram. And we've just connected. And I was like, you need to be on my podcast. I'm starting a podcast. She's like, yes. And we're here. And I feel there's a lot of alignment in what you teach and how I feel in the sense in relating and relations. And I love how you vulnerably express yourself too, because I think that's something that people need to see, that understanding of it's not just an easy path. And I feel so many share so much knowledge without sharing their own experience or their own vulnerability or their own challenges. It's just this effortless, like, this is how you end up. But I think when we're judging ourselves from this idea of the perfect relationship or the person that's having these experiences, they're not really seeing the challenges that we have to navigate in the sense on a daily, personally and in relationship, and what we're going through. It's like a whole lot of like, this is what you're supposed to achieve. And I feel like there's an unrealistic expectation on anyone in comparison. And it's not real for people to grow without understanding someone's story and experience.
Absolutely. The thing is, there's no perfect relationship.
No.
There isn't. So I think there's a big thing happening online when people are putting on their perfect facade of a relationship.
Yeah.
And we actually don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And I have worked with so many couples, so many men, so many women, singles as well, and there just isn't a perfect relationship.
I find that very interesting that you say that too. And it's a similar thing for me where I've sat in a session with people and the next minute, or a single, and next minute what they're posting online is completely opposite to the conversation we've just had. And it's really sad because people are just comparing themselves to that fairy tale story, literally, an attachment to their ideal of what they want. And it's not real because I've sat in a completely different conversation where that person is. So those two realities are very different, what people show and what people are experiencing.
100%. It happens a lot out there. So I think we got to crush the Disney dream.
100%.
Look, of course there is, we can create our ideal relationship. That doesn't mean that it's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, we got to actually know who we are. If we don't know who we are, what our truth is, what our needs are, what we value, then we're kind of dating blindfolded.
Yeah.
So that's why I always say the foundation of self has to be in order before we're actually looking at relationships, because otherwise we're outsourcing from that relationship to meet all of our needs. And our partner and our relationship is not meant to meet all of our needs, not all of them.
Completely. So, and I think we go in blindly, in a sense, with the expectation, and once we meet our person, that they're going to know what we need. And like you said, if you're walking in outsourcing what you need in someone else, it's never going to be met because you don't even know what that is.
Exactly.
And even when you have a concept or an idea of what you want to bring in, can you actually hold space for that when it comes in? Because it's very disturbing for the nervous system and it's opposite to what you believe you deserve. So unless you know that depth of yourself, it's a completely different thing of wanting something and receiving it.
100%. And the big misconception is that I see and hear all the time in my work, and people are sharing and expressing. They say, when you meet that person, it's just going to fall in place and you're going to live happily ever after. And I just want to shatter that or just unpack that a little bit more, because it doesn't happen in this way for everybody. Every relationship starts in a different way. Of course, we have those happy stories. We have the couples and the men and the women who have met, and women, men and men, who have met in a really beautiful way. And both parties have said, like, yes, I just knew from the moment I met that person and he just flowed really beautifully. Yeah. And then we have the complete polar opposite, where there was a lot of challenge and a lot of friction at the start and initiated both parties into working through their challenges and actually doing the work and meeting in harmony. And that ended up then being that relationship. That was the thing that continued.
Yeah.
So,
but there always has to be that commitment to self first, regardless, to be in relationship, because relating is always going to mirror back those deepest parts of, or most vulnerable parts of yourself on whatever level that is. And, as you sort of really do understand yourself, sometimes it's so much bigger level when you draw someone in, karmic or past, or, there's so much involved in working through that you really have to hold yourself emotionally and to be able to express yourself and what you need in that, or to have a safe space. And both of you have to hold that for each other. It's not a one-sided deal. And I think that takes a conscious commitment to understand what each other needs and how you navigate those things, but also to know if someone's avoidant or someone's, anxious, or how to work with that and lovingly support that. And with it, I find sometimes it's just this kind of selfish kind of my needs to be filled. If this is not this, well, that's red flag. This whole red flag thing really pisses me off. I don't know if I should call that, but it's just like everything's a fucking red flag now. Yeah. And I feel like it's like as soon as people, and especially obviously in the dating scene, as soon as someone feels uncomfortable or triggered, red flag. Yeah. I'm like, dude, what about if this is something we can grow from? What if this is something that's and for me, it's like just shows where everybody's at, because, hold on, I'll go to the next person. And like you said, looking for the person to make them feel comfortable. That's not relating.
No, there's a big difference going from unconscious relating to conscious relating. And when I refer to unconscious relating, doesn't mean that we're not awake in our life. Of course, we're conscious of life. But unconscious relating is actually relating from our wounds, and we're not aware of our triggers. We're not aware of what's actually showing up in that relationship. We're not aware of our co-creation, our part of that co-creating the challenges or the friction or whatever we're going through. So there's then when we're shifting into conscious relating, it's like I am aware. I'm aware of myself. I'm aware of my part in how I am contributing to this situation. And I love the red flag thing there because people focus a lot on external red flags like you were speaking about. And a really powerful process that I take my clients through is like, okay, you're good at identifying red flags outside of yourself. Let's look at your own red flags.
Yeah.
What are your own red flags? And we should all have the ability to identify our own red flags, like where we have, is it an insecurity? Is it that we're anxiously attached? Is it that we're avoidant? Is it that we fear intimacy?
100%.
And there's always underlying things playing out when we're fearing intimacy. It's actually never fear of intimacy, just as an example.
Yeah. And I think that's the gift that you can bring, is really not recognizing the external. It's really how you're showing up and what are your things that need to be, in a sense, nurtured in a relationship by yourself, but also to be able to share vulnerably with someone else. That sometimes I'm, to explain that, because I feel like we walk into a relationship going, well, you should know what I feel and what I need. And I find this is a very woman thing too. It's like, I'm sorry to say it, but it's like, if you don't know how you feel and what you need, because you're too scared to actually feel the full emotion to understand your own needs, how the fuck is a man going to know what you need? It's that you don't have a rule book.
Yeah.
But I think if you can understand yourself deeply and can express that, well, that can be quite confronting also too, to be able to very, very clear in your expression of how you feel and what you need, because then there's also a level of stepping up on the other part for them to be able to meet you there. But I think for me, it's just like, why are we all walking into these things with no understanding of self, expecting the other person to know and wanting them to feel our wounds or heal our wounds? It's make me feel better. And then when you make me feel uncomfortable, then it's like, well, that's no good for me.
Yes, instead of looking at where is the uncomfortability within ourselves, because every trigger is an opportunity. It's an invitation really to look at our part, to look at what's coming up for us, what's really surfacing within me for me to be triggered. So triggers really are revealing so much about ourselves.
I reckon that's a whole big part. I love the reaction.
Yeah.
I think that's where we learn. I think that the triggery part, not necessarily you want to be triggered all of the time, because I think there is a learning through love and a learning through joy and bliss and stuff like that. But I do think that shadow part of those triggers and where that can take you, you can't get to that part until can really clear that within yourself.
100%. We got to meet ourselves before we can meet someone else in those steps. We got to understand ourselves. And the mind reading thing is quite an actual, it is a woman thing. It's more so a woman thing. And where that comes from is that, and this is a big foundation of my work, I focus on the differences between men and women. And we think that, it's simple. We're actually two completely different species.
Yeah.
We are like literally different species. We think differently. We process information differently. We're motivated by different things. And the whole functionality.
I was going to say our whole cycles are different.
Yeah.
Which is something that we haven't been attuned to either.
Yeah. Yeah, men have a 24-hour cycle. Yeah, we have a full month cycle.
Very different.
So there is so much that goes into that. And women then think that men should just know. But men are different. They think differently. They're not going to know unless we as women learn to communicate our needs and learn to be very specific, and not just communicating our needs, but how we're communicating our needs. So what I see a lot in this work is that a lot of women don't know how to communicate with men so that it lands for them. So there's a lot of the similar kind of complaint of, I have to ask 10 times. He should just have common sense, right? Common sense. And he should just pick up the socks off the floor or pick up the wet towel or whatever it is. And this is not how it works.
But it's always like the wet towel really is so much deeper for a woman than the wet towel.
Yes, it is. It's never about the wet towel.
It's never about the wet towel, and that's the big thing. It's not the wet towel on the ground. What it means that you've left the wet towel on the ground, and how it feels unappreciative or not seen. And it's like, so the wet towel is not the issue.
Never the issue. It's about how we feel.
Yeah.
So, but then we communicate, or most women, before they learn the art of conscious communication and feminine masculine communication, so that masculine can receive that information and actually attend to it. We communicate from a space of we focus on the wet towel.
Yeah.
We focus on the problem, there's a wet towel.
Yep.
But if the man doesn't actually know why, he's not going to attend to that. It's not important to him.
Yeah.
But when he understands
how it feels
and how it's going to make her life easier, then he's like, of course, now I get it. There's an actual sense of purpose because men are very purpose driven. So when they understand what is his purpose in doing something, in showing up for the woman, it changes the game.
But it's even similar. I know this is weird, but it's similar to parenting my boys. It's like there has to be a motivation and understanding for them about what it feels to me than me just saying the thing, because they're focused on one thing. They're only focused on the thing that's in front of them or what they're doing in that moment. And unless I can grab their attention and actually share from a place of why I need that support or what it feels like to me, or if I've reacted a certain way for them to understand why, then nothing changes in the house.
No.
And I find too, and we've had this discussion, I was having it with Harmony before, men as boys are so freaking sensitive. And it's only, and even working with men, and you would know this, how deeply wounded and sensitive they are, and it hasn't been met. And how as women we can shut that down, because when they start to really unravel that, it's a bit chaotic, and it sort of tends to look weak, and a lot of women then feel very confronted by that. By that woundedness in men.
And the woundedness, I mean, we all have a wound to some
100%.
extent. And how we can suppress another person is going into the relationship having high expectations of open up, or it's like, I need you to open up. And women tend to have a deep yearning for men to open up, to open their hearts and to actually be vulnerable. And a lot of the things that has happened in relationships is that because there's been wounded relationship and unconscious relating and not being aware of our parts, there's been a lot of criticism from women towards men. So a lot of judgment, belittling, emasculating criticism. And that just takes men deeper and deeper into their shell. So men too, just like 100%, women, have to feel safe.
100%.
Right? So if they don't feel safe to open, they're not going to.
And I really do think it's that deep understanding of yourself to hold a safe space, whatever. And I mean, that's something for me, not only in relationship, but for what I bring to mothering, for what I bring to my clients, because I know for me, that is my main importance for myself and for anyone that I want to be in my presence, that they feel safe and seen. And at least be heard in some way, even if it doesn't, if at the moment I can't like meet that need, or but at least I've always had a very deep understanding regardless. And I can always read what's not said. So that's something that I've learned to navigate, because just because I know what they're feeling and they're not expressing it, I've learned that will trigger people, but I can also hold that space too and not take it personally.
Yes, and that's a really beautiful thing about the journey of actually doing the deep work on ourselves, because I too have been in a space of unconscious relating back in the day, and
we all have, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, been completely horrendous relationships and violent, and all the things that play out. You know,
and I learned so much. But it's like, and you really beautifully articulated, because now, because you're so self-aware, you can be aware of the other person. We can only be aware of the other person deeply if we're aware of ourselves deeply.
I think as women, or I know as an empath, and I know as a hypersensitive person that grew up in a place that was hypervigilant as well, through my sensitivity, I was always over aware of my partner's needs, over pleasing, over giving, because there was a worthlessness in me that didn't want to be alone and needed to be loved. So I would put up with anything because I felt like it was my responsibility to hold that space, because I understood their wounding so well. It was like my own. And I never wanted them to feel how I felt. So I held space for some really broken men and abandoned myself in that process. And it's taken me, in those younger years, some of those relationships, and I even said in the last, I think it was with Danny, like, I left one relationship going, if I don't leave, he's going to kill me. Like, I've got a choice here. I was only in my 20s and I was in Japan. I was like, this is a big choice to make. But it was like this high thing. Are you going to live, or what are we doing here?
Yeah.
And then that was the start of choosing me, walking away from that relationship.
Yeah. This is the most powerful thing, the choosing self, because what happens a lot in a relationship is self-abandonment. And I've got that same pattern. Sorry, I had that same pattern, rephrase. I can resonate with that. It was a huge pattern that played out within me as well, complete self-abandonment. First, it shifted from running away. So I was that avoidant girl, running away from relationships because
I was the other one. I was the anxious one.
Then I turned into the anxious. So when I flipped. Yeah. So we can swap and change.
Dysregulated.
Yeah. And then when I was finally willing to, okay, I'm going to stop running away from love, running away from men. And I'm like, okay, let's start doing the work. I'm going to start leaning into these things. Then because I had an abandonment wound that was playing out. And then I wanted to do everything I can to hold on to it so that it wouldn't leave. So then I created the opposite. Then I created the opposite. So yeah, it's a really interesting journey, but that it just teaches us so much. If we can actually bring loving conscious awareness into our relationships instead of, oh, that person did this to me. It's like, okay, if we look at being in an unhealthy relationship, I've been in several back in the past, but it's like, what part of me tolerated that?
Oh, 100%.
You know, we always put the blame on there's person. Always there's a victim, the perpetrator, and the
you were the
villain.
worst out of the relationship, so it was your fault because it looks darker or worse, or you know, because there was but you were the one that was staying. You were the one that was letting that behavior be okay. You kept choosing this. And I knew that was me choosing it. I knew I wasn't meant to be there, but then there was part of me going, why am I here? I've always had this from a really little girl, looking from a bigger perspective, of like, what am I doing? Like looking at myself sometimes, like remote viewing myself and going, okay, why am I doing this? Like, and I've always questioned this, and I've always recognized, you know, from a young age, you know, my patterns and beliefs and everything from my dad and my mum. I focused a lot on my dad in my younger years, obviously because of that relationship and him leaving and cheating and, you know, what happened in that. So I always just thought that was my issue. But it's so interesting, the older I got, how connected a lot of my stuff was to my mother.
It always comes from our childhood. That's the first point 100%. where we collect our beliefs and core wounding and our programming. So yeah, we got to have the ability and awareness to look at, why are we staying? When we're staying and tolerating really unhealthy realities, we got to, at some point, we have to look at, what is it within me? Is it really, is this how I value myself? Is this really my level of self-worth?
But I don't think
that
it's
I
women
tolerate
we've been taught
this?
value for self.
No, we haven't. And relationships are not something that comes with this grand manual.
No, far
you
out.
know?
Yeah.
We're just born into society, born into whatever parents that we've chosen, or born in, or life that we're born into. And then we take on that unconsciously. So
I mean, how many of us really have had role models of relationships to then recreate that in our lives? I don't know many. From you know, as in really conscious relating parents that have navigated a long-term relationship. And I think people have moved through different things and have loving relationships, but even and this is what I find, people minimize their pain or their past understanding of their childhood because they had a good life. Doesn't mean just because you had a good life that your perception as a child or your needs emotionally, spiritually were met. And that creates trauma and disconnection in self. But because it's not necessarily really bad and really traumatic, we think that it's not worthy of really going, or we don't have trauma.
Yeah, trauma, we think that trauma is these big horrendous things that happen to us, but it goes deeper than that. Trauma
so subtle,
can
a little bit
literally
too.
be just an imprint in the nervous system. Something happens, a need wasn't met or an experience, and then we create a different imprint in our nervous system, and that also falls under the trauma. Yeah,
and then we find all these ways to cope, and then we bring those into relationships, and then it's playing out again and again. Yeah. And you're like, why am I hold on, you're the same person in a different suit.
100%.
Don't you love that?
Meeting
like,
the same person with a different face.
Yes. It's like, how am I here again? Better version, but shit.
Our patterns reveal so much if we're willing to look at them.
100%.
Yeah.
I think that's why I've never given up on, well, I've always been a bit of a love person, and connection and relationships have always been my thing. It's probably only really been the last, since I left my husband, but the last 3 years specifically that has been dedicated to me. You know what I mean? And that's been such an impactful choice of going, no, that's not right for me, or no, I'll give my all. What's it showing me? Okay, I'm finished, and to have that ability to walk away when I've been someone to hold on to like grim death, literally, is so empowering, because it's just a learning every time now. And the letting go is just so easy.
Yeah.
Once I really meet myself with what that feeling is, and just let that be okay and validate it, and just work with myself, and then it's just, okay, I'm fine with it now.
It's so interesting. The relationship work is actually work on yourself. It's a deep work on ourselves, because when we shift internally, then we shift how we're relating with other people, and we shift what we're attracting, what we're experiencing. So it's so powerful. Things change, reality changes. It has to. We are co-creators with energy, with reality, with God.
Yeah. Do you think also too, and I find this within my own reality, that sometimes we'll have this big shift within ourselves, but there's a little bit of a timeline catch up, in the sense of like things still have to play out from that we created here. And it's like we get tested to hold this new now version of ourselves. Are we going to lean back in and just, like we were talking about, I think you've been saying, I've got all these shifts and I'm getting pulled and I feel like I'm getting tested, or I know that it's just standing here sometimes and waiting for this reality to move through.
Yeah.
And then what you said, that internal sort of shift then starts to present to you externally.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we can get slipped up. It's like, I think we're impatient. It's like, well, I've just had this major shift, and how come, my reality isn't, or how come freaking Prince Charming hasn't turned up, or how come my whole life hasn't changed, because I feel completely different. Why isn't my reality different?
So the internal shift is the first step. That's the first step. And I love when there's a lot of people referring to I'm being tested, or the universe is testing me. I have a slightly different approach to this, because yes, it feels like a test. However, the internal awareness is only step 1. But life is going to keep giving you that same reality, same pattern, until you change it.
100%.
So that's when you met with that same
probably
thing.
not a test, a choice.
Yeah.
That's probably in the sense where it's asking you to consciously make a choice when you keep getting presented.
Yes.
That's what I call a test.
Yeah.
It's like, are you going to choose what you have always chosen, or are you going to sit with this?
Yeah. We got to make a different choice. We have to show up differently to that pattern that has continued to show up in that situation. So when we then make that different choice, we're then shifting a timeline.
Yes.
We then break through the pattern.
Yes.
And then that same reality won't come anymore, because you've shifted how you show up.
Yeah.
So all this awareness, it's like, yes, let's just more information, more knowledge. It's like it's actually not a lack of information or knowledge or understanding.
Much information,
there is so much information out there. Yeah. It's actually, what do I do with that information? How can I apply that into my life? And how can I show up differently in those challenging moments? Because anyone can show up beautifully when we're all happy and joyful and
100%.
feeling loved. But what happens
when you're challenged? When
we're feeling challenged.
And that's where I feel like all the work, or where you truly are at, is shown. How do you show up for yourself when shit just falls apart? What are you saying to yourself internally? What are your expectations on yourself? How are you nurturing yourself through it? It's that really internal dialogue and meeting of self and what you need in those moments. And I find most people try and hustle their way out of it, or avoid what's really internally happening, instead of allowing that to be okay and validating it. Because it's like, I shouldn't be here now. Why am I here again? It's like, and I've been doing this, feels like forever. And I find sometimes we'll even move around, and yes, the pattern and the timeline might change, but another version of it will present itself, but you have a different awareness to meet it. And so you can love that part of it when it comes up again differently. And hold it differently, even though it might be the same pattern or aspect of yourself that might be presenting itself through you, like an inner child or past version of yourself. It's still showing you something that's not being fully integrated, that you can see it now with the awareness you had, but you couldn't see it back then.
Yeah. 100%. And that's an art to learn to do on your own if you're not in a relationship. And then the step 2 is, okay, self-awareness and how can I navigate that part of me? But if we're in a relationship and that happens, how can I also lovingly learn to communicate to my partner what I'm going through? So because when we're feeling challenged, we can then easily start projecting onto our partner and blaming them or just shutting them out and shutting them off without actually bringing this awareness into, this is my part, this is not you, this is me, this is what I'm navigating.
Well, it comes back to that self-responsibility in the sense of like, we can always project and blame, and we can also shame ourselves in that process. But how can we sit and go, what is it showing me? And instead of going straight out that way, coming out of reaction, coming back in and going, what's going on internally? But that's a nervous system, quiet the mind, come back into the body. How am I feeling? And then it's like following the cord all the way back in.
Yeah. And there's a lot of complaints in relationship, and we complain, but every complaint is actually an unmet need or an unmet desire.
Yeah.
Every single time. And most people communicate from the complaint. We're showing light or shining light on the complaint instead of what am I actually what am I actually really needing? What need is unmet? What am I really yearning for in this moment? And if we can focus on those things and communicate that lovingly instead of blaming that this has happened or focusing on the complaint, everything shifts.
And I think there is also a space that we have to stop taking things so personally.
Yeah.
And if you want to have a relationship that you are relating in, it's not about being right. You know, and if you want to be right, it really does come from a reactive protection of what you're stoic in the sense of I don't want to go there.
Yeah, the righteousness is huge. But I always say, do you want to be right or do you want to have a happy relationship?
Yeah. Well, it's either choosing to be right or choosing love. And it's not really even choosing loving someone else. It's choosing to love yourself deeper so that you can understand that, because we're only really protecting a part of ourselves that doesn't want to be seen.
Always. Yeah.
And that's what I fucking love about relationships. It's like, it's just this constant unraveling of deepening. And it's something that I've always seen so easily in others. But it's interesting when you have to then practice that deeply on yourself. And I now that's become an art, like you said, for me. Because I find that so rewarding to go, I can hold that within me now. I can see that within me.
Yeah.
You know, and to have those conversations so openly and to go, I'm not scared of being vulnerable or what that even shows up in me, because I'm fine with that part of me.
Yeah.
And even if it does come up, I can hold that. Yeah. And I'm not scared for you to see that either.
Conscious relating is such a beautiful art, and I love this journey because we're deepening the quality of our relationships. We're deepening the quality of our connections, and as we're evolving and deepening this part of us, we're also shifting in how we're relating. So there's a lot of women and men who complain as well. I've done so much work, like I have this awareness now. Why does the pool seem to get smaller with people? And it kind of gets smaller because we relate from a different space. So the older realities that we once kind of played out, we're not just available for those anymore.
And I think that is, you know, at one stage, that really saddened me a lot. I was like, you know, there was this part of me, I'm going to be alone forever. And now it's actually freeing, because there's a part of me that's like, the right person will come in the right time as long as I'm showing up and being seen and I'm authentically being me. But if I'm playing versions of me and putting my energy in all these other places, then I'm so distracted. I'm not really focusing on my alignment and my energy and what I really want to bring into the world, which is me. Then how's that person going to find me anyway? And why am I looking? It's that going back to the attraction. And I think we're always kind of wanting to move faster and force the situation. And I think as a woman, that comes back to this really deep trust and allowance and surrender into ourselves that it's okay. Just breathe.
Coming back into our body as well, and learning to relate from wholeness rather than from wounded parts or incomplete parts of us. So that goes from unconscious relating to conscious relating. We actually bring the energy fully back into ourselves, and we're not seeking. Where is he? Where is she? And
because you're looking for a part of yourself that you haven't met, really.
Yes.
Because you're wanting that and there's nothing wrong with desiring a relationship. Or shameful to want that.
Not at all.
But I think it's when we're seeking for that because we're lacking or we feel alone.
Yeah, or if we can't be alone. So there's relationship jumping. I call it monkey branching from one to another to the next is another
branching. That's good.
Another avoidance pattern that we're playing out within ourselves.
And because I think that aloneness too, which is my favorite thing to be, alone. It's weird. Like I just really love my hermit time.
Yeah.
You know, and it's, you know, with you got boys, nothing's ever quiet. But people go, what are you doing the weekend? I'm like, don't I know? It's like I really just love my own time. And I spend it kind of like, I think in between realms half the time and just being, because I'm so intimately relating all the time with people, my clients, my kids. You know, I'm present so many places that I just want to be with me.
Yeah.
And I have these huge moments and I don't know really what I'm doing because people are, what are you doing? I'm like, not much. I don't want to do. Yeah.
It's nice to be after seeking and filling up so much space.
I don't want to do anything. I'm someone that likes freedom and a lot of space. And that's even in a relationship for me. I don't mind you being around. I just don't want you in my grill needing me all the time.
Yeah.
Like I'm a very much, freedom is a huge thing for me, but I like close and connected. And I want to feel like when we go in, we're there and you can be in my space, but we don't need each other, but we're just there.
Yeah. And that's relating from wholeness. That's the beautiful shift that happens when we come home to ourselves. And in that process, we're actually learning to know who we truly are. And when we know who we truly are, we know our needs, we know our values, we know how we want to relate. And anything that's not that, it's like, no, thank you. I don't have the availability or space for that. And I would rather choose to be on my own than something in alignment.
Yes, and it's interesting how many people, if my stepdad said to me, so have you got a relationship? Like, it's like, have you got a relationship? You never really need a man, like, you know. And it's a real woman thing. I think no one says it to a man. You really need you know what I mean? It's like, but for a single woman, especially as you get old, you really like, you haven't got a relationship yet? And I even had it because I didn't get married, or I didn't have kids and get married till I was older. I got married when I was 36 and had my first 38, second at 40. But I was never in a hurry. I don't know why. I always knew I was going to be mum. I just knew it would fall into place. Did I choose the right person? I chose the right person at the time. He was safe. He's a great dad. There's a lot of things that we didn't align on because I probably knew that, but he was the most safest person I'd been with in the sense normal, for the erratic crazy that I'd had. So there was this space in time, but then I grew so fast it wasn't enough. And then when I had boys, I was like, I don't want a friendship relationship with no depth.
Yeah.
For them to see that this is a relationship.
Yeah.
Especially for me, it's a lot of responsibility being a mother, and I always knew that of boys.
Yeah.
That I had a commitment to them, not only to me.
Yeah.
To show them, because I'd already dated a lot of unconscious men and a lot of men that had mother wounds, deep ones, and watching them feel so unprotected and abandoned emotionally and spiritually by their mothers in relationship to their dad or whoever partner was that, or been, through divorce and things. I watched that in adult men. So it was a very conscious choice to parent my children in a certain way. And I'm sure they're going to have things, but for me as a mother, for them to be there and to be present emotionally and spiritually.
Yeah.
Especially through that 0 to 6 was so important for me.
Yeah, I love that awareness and what you were sharing earlier about your relationship, how you kind of started growing apart. So you had that realization of there's a different path here. A lot of people live from a space of if a relationship ends or marriage ends, it's that it means failure. Yeah. And it actually doesn't. we got to shift we got to rephrase that, because sometimes that's a perfect example of, well, there's two people in a relationship. However, 2 + 2 doesn't equal 1.
No.
2 + 2 equals 3. We're actually building a third foundation, which is the relationship. And we still got to have two sovereign people in that relationship. And sometimes two people simply start growing apart, and our consciousness evolves in different places, and repair, we can try and do all the repair work that, that's available. Yeah. But even that may not be the solution.
Yeah.
So sometimes we
and
then
there's contracts. I really truly believe sometimes there are contracts in relationships and timing. And I know I was meant to have children with my husband because, and now I'm watching him only really recently evolve into being a really present dad. And I love that for my boys because they need him more than they need me, which now it's a beautiful space for me because now I can come into my own space. So I feel like there's this switch in the sense of like, great, I've got some space to be me. I've mothered these kids to the best of my ability alone and consciously moving through everything. And now it's time to really step into my power and be seen. So there's really, it feels like this timing thing, which I really trust that it just has evolved exactly. And I was lucky enough with my parents when they split that even though it wasn't in the greatest way, they always never spoke badly about each other, even though I knew what had happened because, dad had cheated and mum, the way it sort of had evolved wasn't great. But I've ended up with an amazing spiritual mentor as a stepmom. My mum navigated that because that was the person that my dad ended up moving into straight away from marriage to my stepmom. So it was a very interesting dynamic. For my mum to hold that space, I recognize now how a lot that would have been for her, but she was very good at suppressing and hiding. But she did tell me initially, so I took that as dad left me, so that was interesting. But in the journey of like watching it, they always stayed friends, and they always, even though dad never really did completely the right thing, they always respected each other's space in our lives. And that then has taught me too, you can still have love and respect for someone ongoing in marriage and co-parent. I mean, I think I parented a lot of the part and my ex has been the co, and now I think we're co-parenting. So sometimes there's going to be, even in that relating.
That's really beautiful. That's really beautiful when two parents can actually come into, even though the path is separate, but there's like, can we just still work as a team? Yeah. Because we brought these children into this world instead of fighting against each other. And actually, I see this in my work a lot, and it really, really breaks my heart. And parents are using the children to get back at each other. And they're trying to get back at each other, but they're actually destroying a part of the evolution of their children and what they're actually taking on board as a child.
Because how are they going to relate in the separation of a relationship?
Yeah.
And that's something that I will always honor from my mum and dad. And even like my stepmom and my stepdad, and when my mum was alive, if it was ever the boys' things, my wedding, everyone was together. It's never been something that everyone couldn't be in the room together for celebrations. I mean, they were all like, and civil and caring and respectful to each other. And my mum and my stepmom did a lot of stuff with my mum while she was dying. And so it was 35 years. And if you can't move beyond the relationship you had to have a new relationship and relate differently, then I think that you're missing out on what possibilities you can have. And it's not easy because, and this is what I find, that when you haven't probably my age, when you date someone that hasn't had kids and hasn't got an ex, because once you haven't got a partner anymore, they're gone. You know what I mean? To then having someone with kids, that there's always an external mother or a father that's still there. They don't go away. Well, they can. Yeah. But, if you want to have, I think, that dynamic as a family, and you want to show your kids how to relate, I think it's really important. And my ex and I have that. I, met partners and had dinners or birthdays and the kids, we've been together. I want the kids to see that.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because no matter what happens in the previous relationship before the separation and children being involved, there could be a lot of pain and hurt that has been created in that relationship, but the children actually have nothing to do with that. And moving from unconscious relating to conscious relating, inclusive of unconscious parenting to conscious parenting.
Same thing.
It's the same thing. We got to deal with our problems and our issues and our challenges behind the scenes. The children don't need to be dragged along into that. We don't need to turn the children
But I mean, it
against
comes down
each
to
other.
how that whole ancestral thing, isn't it? It just keeps
Yeah.
getting passed on and passed on, that whole relating thing.
Yeah. So at some point, you know, we have a choice. We can simply go, I'm so sick and tired of living these same problems and challenges and being in this reality. And that happened very specifically for me, actually. I grew up with 3 really unhealthy role models, masculine role models. So I had my father, my stepfather, and then my brother, who's very, very disturbed in his evolution. So those 3 males reflected unhealthy behaviors from the masculine. So I then grew up with a lot of distorted beliefs around what a man is and how the masculine treats women.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel safe around men.
Yeah.
So I created a lot of really unhealthy relating situations. I was in abusive relationships, domestic violence, narcissistic
You and I sound like we've been
situations.
down the same road.
And I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah.
And I remember when that happened, the shift when that happened. I'm like, I am so tired. I had an awakening. We have many in our life. We have many
100%.
shifts in consciousness. So it's not just one thing.
Yeah.
But I can pinpoint one moment after I had my so-called grand awakening. That could be a podcast just itself.
Yeah.
But I actually got to a point where I am so tired. I feel so exhausted going through this, you know, same thing over and over. And I don't care what it takes, no matter how long it takes, I'm going to break through my patterns. I'm going to create a different reality within myself and the way that I relate with the masculine, with men. And I actually married myself. I don't know, you probably didn't know this.
No, I didn't know that. Did you really?
Okay, so when I said married myself, this is not the traditional society thing, you know.
Yeah.
This was
Like a commitment to self.
commitment to self. And I had an actual devotional commitment ceremony.
Wow,
You know how we do full
cool.
moon ceremonies and we do morning rituals.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing, but I took it as a self-love ceremony. And it happened on Valentine's Day 7 years ago.
That's cool.
And I wrote vows to myself, wrote commitments to myself, and my
Cool.
friend actually married me to me.
Oh my God, that's
And
cool.
there I was. I held a handheld mirror and I was declaring and devoting to myself.
Yeah.
Because I always thought, why do we make these commitments to other people? Why don't we got to sort our own inner stuff out first.
100%.
To stop self-abandoning, to stop people-pleasing, to stop tolerating and to stop mistreating others. So that was my devotional commitment ceremony to myf.
I love
And from that moment on, little did I know it went completely viral globally, by the way.
I must have missed this whole thing. I must have been in the parent
It was
mode.
a very polarizing thing, right? So the media loves to polarize
of course.
humans. And look, it didn't go viral the way that I would have loved to.
Yeah.
Of course, the people who got the message, they understood what I did and my intention behind it, but it got twisted. This is when I learned how the media actually operates. The best headline I read, it was an Indian newspaper. It was a photo of me.
Serious?
And he said, Australian woman marries herself because no man was ever good enough.
Oh my God.
And I just
Well, see, it distorts the whole thing from a man's
Yeah.
point of view too,
Yeah.
in the sense of like, you never said that.
yeah. So no, I didn't. I never did.
But
So
that's the perception of why a woman would marry herself. It's like because no one is good enough. But that's not even what it was about.
So my commitment to my ceremony to myself wasn't to live on my own and never have relationships. It was actually the complete opposite.
That's
to heal my relationships with men and to have better relationships with men. So to me, it didn't represent sologamy, which other women who it's a whole trend. Some people, marry themselves and then they're just on their own for the rest of their life.
When you are by yourself and you know, we can live in a space where we're not triggered, we've got our little routines and we feel like we're evolving. Well, it's not until you're in a relationship that you go, oh, I'm not as healed as I thought I was, you know, and I think if you're not relating, you're really isolating.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
100%.
and I think you stop evolving on some level.
Yes, we can only do so much work on our own. We can sit with every single plant medicine ceremony and
100%.
whatever else, but eventually that's just one aspect of it.
Yeah. And if you're only doing the knowledge part of it too and you're not embodying it, then it's only knowledge. You're not practicing it.
I always say our true level of consciousness is revealed in our relationships.
Yep.
How we treat other people.
Yep.
How we show up in the challenging times.
Yep.
Always.
And you can sit in any, and this I've got a little bit of a thing about the whole plant medicine thing, especially when it comes to coaching and holding space for people. I've seen people come back with a whole lot of knowledge and insight. It's not embodied or integrated or experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're coming back like some guru to share, but not being able to hold the space and re-traumatizing people because they haven't really integrated or met it within themselves. Yeah. And I mean, I suppose that's the same as relating, and we're going to be attracted to that in relationship. But it really is a disservice for people that are really stepping in and are doing this work. And it's unfucking comfortable. And it's messy.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's going to be a shadow playing out with every single thing.
Yeah.
In relationships, in coaching, in relating, in everything.
Well,
there's always going to be polarity. And we just got to have awareness of that and to know that there's a polarity in everything. There's contrast, and we're in a human experience. And no matter how much we do work on ourselves and how much our consciousness evolves, there's always going to be another shadow there somewhere in what we're experiencing. But do we have that awareness to see where that shadow plays out?
And I think it's also, like you said before at the start, not outsourcing in the sense your power or your validation or, you know, sourcing it outside of yourself, because you're really, even in the choice of facilitator or someone holding space for you on this, are you trusting how that feels to you? And if it doesn't feel right, then maybe you need to question that a little deeper. Not if it's triggering in the sense of in a good way that they're supporting you through it in a co-regulated support to navigate the uncomfortable. Or is this playing out a whole relationship that is very unconscious between the facilitator? I've seen that happen a lot. And that's where I think when we are on this healing journey, relationship journey, that you have to really trust deeply within yourself who you're letting into your space, relationship-wise, facilitator-wise. You know what I mean? Because
100%.
I think sometimes we put, like we even go back to the start, what we see on Instagram to what is reality. We're going on a persona or a perception of the evolvement of someone that is higher than us. No one is higher than us.
No, it's never a hierarchy, and we think that it is. That's all ego-based.
Yeah. And to me, it's like we're walking beside each other here, and there needs to be a co-creation in that relationship that you're building with your client. And I feel sometimes it's disheartening for people on this journey because they open up vulnerably sometimes to a facilitator or someone in a relationship, but they haven't to anyone else, and then that gets shut down.
This is the shadow of that part.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunately, but it does happen because all coaches are actually not relationship coaches. They still have a lot to do with their own relationship work. They could be business coaches.
But I mean, that's why we do the work we do, is because we want to help other people because we're healing that within ourselves. Yeah. And I think we're always.
And as a space holder and mentor, we got to also learn how to meet our clients, because that is, like you said, that's also a relationship. And if we don't know how to hold space for them, if they happen to have a breakdown, how can we guide them back into safety? How can we guide them back into love? And these are such vital key things that we need to understand. It's a big responsibility as a facilitator. Yeah. And there's a lot of shadow playing out in that space too.
Yeah. And I think it's when it comes to relationships, and I think that is such a deep wounding, like we were talking about, that you would never go out of business, babe. Like it's something that I think we all divinely are guided to have a deep relationship, and we want to feel seen and we want to feel heard and loved and connected and all of those things. But like you said, it always has to come back to yourself. And don't lose sight of that in relating to anyone. Whether it's someone that you've put on a pedestal or not, you really have to take everyone off a pedestal. You have to sit them beside you and go, do you really know more than me? It's like, and that's where the competition disappears too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? In the sense of like, what if like we can just walk beside each other and hold that space for each other, and we're not comparing or fighting or protect, you know what I mean? That's such a different reality.
Yeah. Yeah. We really got to take people off a pedestal. It happens a lot. And I definitely used to be that woman who put others on a pedestal, even men. I'm like, oh, wow, look at that man. He's so amazing and so embodied. And there was separation. So when we're pedestaling people, we're actually creating separation.
Yeah.
And there's a belief that we're less than. And the danger here is when we're pedestaling people is that eventually that person is going to come off the pedestal. It happens every time.
Because reality comes in.
We created such high expectations of them to be this idea that we've created in our own mind. So we're actually relating with the idea of them instead of the truth of who they really are.
And I mean, I think that even happens as a child, this fairy tale attachment we have to life, not reality.
Yeah.
You know, and I think especially for women, you know, we're always wanting the man on the white horse to come in and save us. But the white horse and the person on it is you. Because the only one that's saving you is you. No one's coming here to save you.
No.
And
Disney has a lot to answer for this.
I know, right?
For these fairy tales.
And I think there's a beautiful aspect of it, because I think I am such a sucker for love. And I don't think that will ever I don't want to diminish that love or the idea of love and the innocence of that. Because I think the innocence of love is actually really beautiful. And I don't want that to be tainted by, you know, I suppose it is reality in a way, but I think I've grown to love myself that way through the reality. And it's been a fucking harsh reality, don't worry. But it's like, but to come back to see the beauty of it and just how it has been so orchestrated in such a very uncomfortable but beautiful way, it's really humbling.
Yes, that it is humbling because there's been moments even in my own journey where I'm like, okay, I've done the work, you know, and then life gives me that. I'm like, what is this?
What am I doing?
What is this? What am I meant to do with this?
I love that. What is this? Why?
It's like, okay, what is it within me that is still attracting this? What is it here for me to learn?
And I think sometimes it's not always what is it within me. What if it's just you are there, not necessarily completely for you? What if it actually is for benefit of the other person? That what you are bringing into their life is actually for them.
Yeah, it absolutely can be that kind of mirror as well. But we also receive something. So everything is an
100%.
exchange. So if we're experiencing something, there's like we're still receiving something from that experience.
But sometimes I think we go into the catastrophe of like, oh my God, what is it? I've got more work. And it's like we get so, you know what I mean? Stuck in that idea of it's like
healing. Yes.
That we're not enough still and we haven't, there's something in here. I mean, there's always going to be aspects but you can move through them very effortlessly and easily when you know it. And then there's going to be the harder, deeper ones that are really uncomfortable and a bit overwhelming and emotional. But it's like they're not scary anymore. But you know, that part of us that every time we have those, what is this?
Yeah.
That there's something wrong with me still.
Yeah. That's a pattern that I shifted within myself, and it's actually really empowering because it's once again the homecoming of self and permission to be messy. Like being human is really messy and relationships are messy.
Yeah.
Like we're not going to be this perfect. Doesn't matter how much work we do on ourselves, how conscious we become, how much our consciousness evolves.
No.
We're not going to reach a point where everything's happy and amazing all the time. We're still going to have earth-shattering, soul-shattering experiences from time to time.
We're human.
And that doesn't mean that we're not worthy or we haven't done enough work. It's like I give myself permission to be messy. I'm human.
And I think
accept
that's
myself.
when we come into this whole conscious relating and spirituality, that it's not supposed to be that.
No.
Fuck me. Like, I'm like, and then, yes, I've touched, you know, a lot of my higher self. I work with that now and that reality and the bliss, like that shit's amazing. But when you are navigating it humanly, we're not always going to hold that level of space every day, every moment, but knowing that you're guided innately. But I see so many people just bypassing for the high and wanting, and I see it a lot in, I suppose, plant medicine, all it is, I just want to keep getting what's out there, and this whole disassociation to the humanness and the messiness that we're not really transmuting it through the body.
Nah, it's nothing but another avoidance pattern.
Yeah.
If we're constantly seeking, avoiding being with ourselves, we need more of this, more of that, more plant medicine, more of all the things.
Or even isolation. I see a lot of people,
Yeah.
like when we go back to that, I just need to be by myself and connecting to this. And there's a real, yes, I think we all have to have that space. But then how do we deal with the triggers and the challenges when we relate? Do we just go back to, oh no, I don't need, we're missing the point.
Yeah.
Because we're not really raising our vibration in our bodies.
Yeah.
Because we're not. And yes, you might be able to hold a space when you're out there, but can you bring that in and hold that light and clear what is that heaviness in your physical body and hold a different vibration?
And can we actually bring that into our relationships? Can we integrate it into the body and also integrate it into how we're interacting with other human beings? That's where the real work is.
Yes.
So I always say,
that's the epitome of it,
I
isn't it?
love observing how people interact with each other. Even in public, I'm like,
oh, me too. I know that's probably not very spiritual, but I love watching reality TV because I love watching people relate. It's so unconscious, I know, but I just
But also, is that a judgment? That you're judging that part of you that loves to watch those things.
No, I love it. I fully own it. Like I fully own it because I love watching relationships. I'm a people watcher. I love watching people play through their wounding and how that works out, and just all the interactions of the unconscious with the conscious and the little moments of vulnerability, and I love that shit.
I do too.
It's just turns me on watching people grow and relate, and I love it.
And because there's a deep interest there, within obviously you and I, we've created a really deep interest in relationships, in actual conscious evolution. So it's a huge passion for mine, honestly. Sets my heart on fire.
Yeah.
And that fire was actually born from my challenges. When I had that moment of shifting, no more, I'm done, I'm going to draw the line in the sand, which was I'm choosing myself.
Yeah.
And the choosing self isn't just one decision. It's actually something that happens over and over and over again.
I feel like it's a conscious moment to moment choice.
It is.
And that's been the most life-changing presence that I've given myself, that really to hold that direction or that embodiment is those moment-to-moment decisions of how I'm responding to myself in every interaction.
Yeah.
That's because you can do it in moments, or you can sit in meditation, or you can do your breath work, or you can do and all these things, but what are you doing for the other 23 hours of the day? What are you saying to yourself on those other 23 hours of the day? I find I wake up and I do this and I've got this and I've got that and I've done that. Great. And so what are you doing for the rest of the time?
100%. Yeah.
How are you relating then?
Yes. These are all tools, breathwork, meditation, all of these things that we do, journaling, they're all tools. But then exactly what happens when you take yourself into the arena of the rest of the day?
And what if you don't have those tools or the accessibility to do all the things? I watch people unravel and I see so much mindset and we've got to do this and this is how we start the day and this is what we do. And, and these high expectations of creating these fucking rituals and ways of being that when shit happens and you don't have access to that process, how do you navigate life?
Most people fall apart in that moment.
Exactly.
It's like, it's chaos.
Yeah.
But, we can still hold our groundedness in chaos, and that's the real work. How embodied actually are we when there's chaos around?
All the time. Have kids. It's chaos all the time.
That's something I haven't experienced. Children,
kids, dogs, and I that's a very interesting thing, and I love it because like our paths are completely different, but it's still how are you navigating yourself in the chaos? My life is fucking chaos all the time. in a beautiful way, and I love it. And I'm navigating more structure in my life, positive, because I'm such I want to move here and I want that, and then I'm feeling this. And, I've always been very led by how I feel.
Yeah.
But I know now the depth of what I need to bring. And I'm a very action-oriented person, but I'm very off or on. I'm a man, Jan, so it's like I'm either on or I'm off, or I'm hermiting, or I'm, and when I'm calm, I can do more than most people can do in a small amount of time.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know that about myself. So I don't get angry or frustrated anymore. It's like when I'm on, I know.
Yeah.
And we were talking about it before. Yeah. I leave things right down to the end and get everything done.
But that's also like, do we really have to change
No.
in terms of speaking of our soul frequency? Yes, not speaking of the unhealthy patterns. Do we have to change? I mean, we can choose to change. But this is like, how do we operate ourselves? How do we navigate our soul frequency? And that's important to understand and to realize when you bring that into a relationship with somebody else.
Yes.
It's like, this is how this is me.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people want to change each other in that relationship.
Yes.
They get frustrated because the other person's different. Mm-hmm. But we're not in a relationship to change the other person. I mean, if we are, it's going to fall on its head very, very quickly.
Well, it's going to be constant butting heads because you're going to be expecting that person to make you feel comfortable because they keep doing something that makes you feel uncomfortable. And one thing, talking about moving fast, I move fast, and sometimes it's like, where have you gone? And there's this kind of like grabbing at my energy because I've moved.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. I've shifted and I move fast, but it doesn't mean I don't love you the same.
Yeah. And that's also the feminine, the beautiful storm that's just like out there, here, there, and everywhere. Yeah. And the feminine can be fast and chaotic. And then if the masculine doesn't understand, if men don't understand that part of woman, that we're not here to change, we're the feminine. And the storm is always going to be there on some level. And same for, if you take the other polarizing example, men are always going to be men. And we need to learn to understand the differences between each other, how different we are, because that then eliminates misunderstandings and gives more permission for the other person to just be them and we be us.
And I think it's also that really innate balance within yourself, because now I'm working with a much more positive masculine side of myself, as well as I'm integrating with my feminine, and it's fucking powerful.
So powerful.
We can't just be all floaty and I've gone from one extreme to the other, and I've had to do that to deeply understand both sides.
Yeah.
But I know now the balance of that and how powerful that is in the right flow for my energy.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Yeah. And the inner union is always, it's like us, right? Us integrating our own inner masculine and feminine within us, because that's going to continue to reflect outside of us as well.
Yeah.
And it's different chapters, different seasons, and different versions of us that it's like, okay, now I'm a different version. My needs have changed, and what I want to experience, values have changed. Yes. What I want to experience have changed. Like me, for example, now I'm in a chapter of deep, deep, deep devotion. So after my last relationship ended, I'm actually I know exactly who I am. I know exactly what I want, and I'm not available for anything else. I'm not out there casually dating on dating apps, seeking something, needing something, because I'm so home within myself.
Yeah.
So for the time being, I'm practicing conscious celibacy, because I just, what doesn't resonate with me anymore is leaking my sexual energy or leaking my time. It's just not.
It's funny. I'll go on one of those apps, and I'm like on there for one night. I'm like, yep, okay, I'm out. I'm like, sure, maybe. I'm like, and it's like I'll have a moment, and I'm like, it's just this distracted moment. I'm like, no, and then I realized that doesn't even serve me. It's just a distraction of wasted nothingness. But then I don't judge myself for that either. But then I've got to this point now, like you said, it just leaks something that I don't have time for. And now it's not there anymore, you know.
And I'm also looking at, the type of relationship that I desire to be in. I'm looking at that relationship, and I take that as a reflection of, am I being those qualities?
Yeah.
If I want to experience a man who doesn't leak his sexual energy in multiple directions, I got to really rectify what's happening within myself. What am I doing? And it's always like, am I actually being that, what I desire?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's really everything we've spoken about is that remembrance and homecoming.
Oh, and it feels so delicious when we actually just come home.
It's so peaceful.
It is so peaceful. There's no seek. It's wholeness. And relationships from this space completely change.
And you know what? I haven't experienced a relationship yet in this space, and I'm really excited for it. And I'm not in a hurry either. Like, I've had some connections, but not inhuman and just interaction. But then I'm like, okay, it hasn't played out any further, then that's not it. And then I don't hold on to it and it moves on. And then there's this deeper commitment to myself. And it's really channeling into my business and how I want to serve and parent. And it's just so much more clear and not so busy. It's a really weird space, but so guided and trusted, and just there's a little bit like, you know, that frantic, like you said, seeking. It's just kind of not there anymore.
Yeah.
And there's a real innate peace.
I feel you. I feel you. That's really dropped in for me in the last since my previous relationship ended. It's a homecoming that I've never felt before.
Yeah, this is different.
It's different. Very different. And now it's like that, all of that work, all of the challenges, all of the frictions that I've experienced, it was all worth it. And the conscious commitment to myself,
that's the
to
key.
deepen my work, to face my shadows, to face the most uncomfortable parts of myself.
Oh my God, yeah.
I'm like, no more distracting, no more avoiding, no more pretending they're not there. I'm going to actually just consciously make a choice of,
validate it.
Can I validate these parts of myself and show them love and compassion that I've been naming and shaming and running away from?
Yep.
And that's like, yes, this part, come back home.
But we're not just doing it for ourselves. We're doing it and we give permission to everyone else around us, everyone that we connect with. When we do that, there's such a deep permission for everyone else to feel that and what that feels like. And I think that's the gift that doing this and getting to this place is what you offer just by being you. I don't know, I guess me or teary, but that really does feel like the point. Yeah.
We're creating ripples. And for every single person who's watching or listening, is that our devotion to ourselves of actually becoming a better human and doing this deep work on ourselves, we're creating ripples, because every single interaction that we have, whether it's with our children, with strangers, with people in the street, they are a different person. They have that interaction with you instead of a lower version of you.
Yeah.
So by just showing up in our higher self, that creates ripples.
100%. And I really do think it comes from this balance of that feminine energy that needs to rise within everybody.
Yeah.
That is healing everything with the balance of that masculine. And that's that whole union of relating, isn't it? Within yourself.
Yeah.
And with each other.
I love relationships. The messiness, the even the deepest and densest, crappiest stuff, like it's all part of it.
100%. And I think that's a real message from today, is that don't know when it's finished. Keep coming back to yourself. Trust your intuition. Learn and keep asking deeply within yourself, what is here for me? And when it's not, it's okay to let go. Because like we've just shared, what you get to come home to when you devote that to yourself instead of the constant abandonment, even though it's uncomfortable, the commitment and the feeling that you start to, what would you say, resonate from, expand from, live life from, perceive everything from, changes your reality.
Always. It's worth it. It's so worth it.
I know. And that's what I really hope that everyone gets from today, is that, you know, the whole journey is perfectly uncomfortable, imperfect, and that there is such a great place to land. And that you know, we didn't get dealt the pretty cards. But in the uncomfortable, pretty cards we got and the perceptions that we had of ourselves, you can come back and realize that that wasn't necessarily the truth.
I certainly wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth and beautiful relationships. I've navigated some terrible realities.
And that's what I love.
Those were the catalysts of actually changing, making a conscious choice. So anyone can change.
And that's what I think that I want this message to be. Anyone can change. We didn't all come from great beginnings. No. Did anyone, really? And we're all navigating such deep stuff from wherever we've landed from. And I think when we step into our own power, that's, things change. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I knew this was going to be such a cool conversation. And I'm sure there'll be many more conversations from this.
Oh, you bet there will be.
And, if anyone wants to work with Linda, I'll have all of her details in my bio. And I know you have some great conscious couple relating workshops, and that's for singles and couples. And she does some amazing stuff. And she's got heaps of stuff coming up. So stay tuned and I'll share all of Linda's details. But thank you, my darling.